In this video I'm going to show you how you can make fun atmospheric environments like this very quickly and easily. This is a beginner/intermediate tutorial and is suitable for those that have a good understanding of Blender and the interface. But you don't need any complex modeling or texturing skills. If you like what I do, then do check out the other playlists on this channel and my website for more great content. If you like environment design, I would recommend taking my low poly landscapes course to give you a good idea of the basics of Blender along with an understanding of composition. That will greatly help you creating environments like this. Now before we start, it's important to say that the amount of modeling is minimal, and this particular scene is mainly down to using free assets. It's becoming more important to at least know about and understand the influence of scanned assets in environment design, such as used here, and that's for all 3D purposes from games to film, so well worth having a go yourself, and it's really good fun. You can learn a lot just by importing these assets and creating atmospheric scenes like this. This scene only took a couple of hours, and that was more the tinkering with the lighting than anything complicated. So let's start with where we can get these assets and how we can quickly and easily import them into our scene. You'll be surprised how easy it is. So the place I got my assets from is called Quixels. They've got a huge scanned library called Megascans, and they've got a program called Quixel Bridge where you can literally just click a button of download and import and it will appear in your Blender scene. To access this library you will need to sign in. To access this library you'll need to create an account with Unreal, which is free. Then go to sign in, then you can go across to products and choose Bridge. And that's where you can download Bridge. Once downloaded you'll see something like this. They've got 3D assets, and obviously I'm using things like nature and rocks. I think I used a lot from the Quarry, but there's just lots of different types that you can choose for your scene. And in the Quarry you've got these nice cliffs and things like that. Now you can just download these files as FBX files and import them into Blender, but the great thing about Bridge, it does have a live link with Blender, so you can have Blender open and click on import and it will import it in for you. It's a little bit awkward for me to show you without reverting to factory settings, but basically you've got an export target here, and from the drop down list choose Blender. The first time you do that, that will ask you to download a plugin. It will also give you an option to copy the location of that plugin. Then we can go into Blender, go to Edit, Preferences, Add-ons and Install, and you can paste the link address in your files folder. If you're a bit confused about that, there are videos online and I'll paste a link in the description to one of those. It's worth restarting Blender to make sure that's all working. Once you've done that, you can have Bridge open at the same time as Blender. Let's bring that across to the side here slightly. Choose an asset that you like. Let's say this one here. Click on download first and it will take a moment to download that. I'll choose this one that's already been downloaded. You can then hit the export button here and you can see exporting to Blender, and notice that in Blender it just appears. Now if I go to, let's say, Material Preview mode, you can see that inserted into my scene. I'll go back to Bridge just briefly and choose some other ones to bring in. I'll go to my local here, that will tell me the ones that I've already downloaded that I can export straight in. So the floor, for example, and notice that pop up there. Obviously I can scale that up and move it across a bit. Let's delete the cube. And you're starting to see the beginnings of some sort of scene. And it's just a case of downloading these assets and clicking that export button. It's a lovely experience and you can create some wonderfully interesting environments from that. As for the rest of my environment, you can see it all here in Material Preview mode, so it's not got the full effects of the lighting. And you can see the types of things I've done here. I've got these mountains here which are just pushed together, so if I grab this one and press G to grab, you can see it overlapping each other, and it's hardly noticeable when they're the same asset like this. They're not even that expensive, these assets. If I click on one and go to edit mode, you can see the amount of polygons involved. And by expensive, I mean taxing on your processor and graphics cards and so on. It's all to do with the quality of the materials that comes from the scans. You can see that I've got a few floor elements here. And again, they fit in really nicely. If I press G to grab and Shift Z, so it's not in the Z axis, you can see you don't really notice the overlap too much. You might do with some assets, so you'd have to be a little bit careful with that overlap. But once you get a bit of lighting in there, a bit of atmosphere, it all works very well. Now in terms of assets such as the character here, I built the torch myself, so I did model a couple of things in this scene. But the character is downloaded straight from Mixamo. It's even got a simple animation, so I'll press play and you can see there's a sort of idle torch holding animation. So if you're not aware of Mixamo, that's a program from Adobe. It's got all these characters that you can download with animations. Again, this is all free. You do need to register, but it's still a free asset. And again, Mixamo is free to use. You can choose your characters here. So let's say I chose this one and I wanted it to be a bit more cartoony. Then I can go across to animations and choose different animations for them. So old man idle would work in this case. then I can just simply download that. When I click on download, you just put with skin. You can just bring in the armature and attach your own characters with this method as well. Once you've downloaded, file, import FBX, and find your file. Then it was just a case of grabbing the model and the armature and moving it into position. With my torch and my flame image, which I'll talk about in a moment, both of those are attached to that one bone in the wrist there. That's nice and easy to do. You select, let's say the torch in this case, then the armature, go to pose mode with the armature. So pose mode up here, choose the bone you want to attach it to, and then press Ctrl P. And then you can tick the bone option there, and it will connect to your bone. And you can see now that when the armature moves, or that bone moves, my torch moves with it. And the same for my flame image. I'll just come out of pose mode and choose that flame image. This is an interesting one in itself. It's a video from Pexels. So it's pexels.com. These are royalty-free images, and you can go to videos here. And this is the one I chose just here from Simon Error. It has got this little bit down here, and I could put more effort in and take this into an image editing program, mask that out. It's really not worth it though. You don't really notice it in the scene. So back into Blender, I used another add-on to bring it in, which is Edit, Preferences, Add-ons, type in Image, and there's the Import Image as Planes add-on there. Make sure that's ticked. When I press Shift A, you then get this image option here and images as planes. So if I tick that, I can find my file and bring it in. Let's just go to the shading editor so you can see what that looks like. So this is the node setup. It will come in slightly differently than this. I'll just slice these off and move my color ramp out the way for the moment. It will come in with the alpha linked to the alpha. Now because this image doesn't have an alpha channel, there's no use in using that. So you can take that out. What I did instead was put the color into the alpha, and you'll see that gets rid of the background. Because what the alpha is doing is taking the white information of this image and making it visible, and the black information, which was that black background, making it transparent. I then use a color ramp in here as well, and I can increase the brightness of the flame and how much of that black background is transparent on my image. Lastly, I link the color up to the emission. So the emission is actually the color of the flame, and put the emission strength up to 500, which you can see there. And that, if I go to the start of my scene, is doing a pretty good job. You can actually go in to edit mode and maybe add some loop cuts, and you can move this about slightly. So I'll come around to the front here, turn proportional edit on, G to grab, and I could sort of move that into shape if I wanted it to be even more effective. And that's working pretty well as well. So lastly then is the crystals. I'll go back to layout mode for this and isolate one of the crystals with / on my numpad. It's very easy to make these. I'll move my 3D cursor so it's close, Shift A to add, mesh, and then cylinder. Make it something like 12 sides. Actually, maybe I went for 8. That looks about right. Into edit mode with tab, select that top face, E to extrude and S to scale. Bottom face the same, E to extrude, S to scale. And it's a very basic crystal there. With the top and bottom faces, let's select them both. So Shift to select that one, Control F to go to the face menu, or the face menu up here, and poke faces. Then I can move those up and down. I can also go to edge mode and maybe select an edge, GG to edge slide, just to create a bit of variation. I'll go back to object mode and scale in the Z. I think a bit taller, and that looks a bit better, a bit more crystal-like. And if I want to add some variation to this, I can press Shift D to duplicate, move it across to the side, come across to my modifiers here with the spanner or wrench, add modifier and decimate, and then I can change the shape of this using the decimate modifier. I think that looks a bit better. So there's one, Shift D, move it off to the side, add modifier, decimate, and a slightly different one there. So fairly easy to create the crystals. I'll delete those, and I'll show you the material. Nice and simple again, a glass material so the transmission's all the way up, a little bit of transmission roughness. I found that helped quite a lot. Now it doesn't look so great in Eevee. Let's go across to cycles and see how that looks. And that looks a lot better because it's got proper reflections and caustics and things like that. I have got one in there that's got a emission. So one of my crystals in each of the clumps has an emission texture. It has got a Fresnel on it going into a color ramp. And the Fresnel is this kind of outside super reflective bits. And that's going into the emission. But it doesn't really make that much difference. That was just adding a little bit of an effect, but not much. Lastly, let's go back to layout and talk a little bit about the lighting. So you can see it's looking pretty flat in material preview mode, but as I go to cycles, you can see the influence of the lighting having an effect. Each of my lights in this case is actually giving off some emission, which gives it a lot more atmosphere. And if I zoom out a bit, let's go back to material preview mode so you can see right at the very end, I've got one point light just around the corner. Let's go back to camera view, back to cycles, and you can see that point light with an analogous color, which is a color that's the opposite of the color wheel compared to these more turquoisey colors. And that should really make it stand out a lot more, as if we're looking round the corner and there's something interesting to see. Now, to make these scenes your own and to give them your own personality, you'll probably want to have a point of interest that you've made yourself. So something like a character, statue or similar that's the main focus of your image. That way you can really call it your own, even though you have imported lots of these assets. If you are using these assets as a portfolio piece, then do make that clear in your portfolio so people are clear about your skill level. So there we have it, a fairly detailed breakdown of the scene. Hopefully that gives you enough information that you can recreate this yourself or recreate something better. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.